So it's about 5:20 in the morning, just doing my final bits of packing before I head off to Rolwaling Valley, which is either going to be on a jeep or a private bus, not quite sure which yet. Plans have changed quite a lot over the last few days. I was originally going to be going up on the 1st of November, but delayed by a few days to do this movie that we've been talking about with Sarah and Gabriel. Then it was going to be yesterday, joining a friend of mine's trekking client in a jeep, but the trekking client decided they wanted to go a day earlier, so that plan fell through. So now it looks like I'm going to be going up with a couple of the monks from the valley, one of which is a high lama, it's like the spiritual guide of the area, so it's quite special. So up bright and early, after a full-on week of in the country, and probably, if it's a hired bus, then I think probably got about an 8-hour bus journey ahead of us, and then I think they're planning on trekking up to the first village, but we will see. I have no idea what the plan is. So walking into the unknown, which is a bit unnerving. Obviously Western mentality is we always want to know what's going to happen. So hopefully you'll get to come along the way with us, and I'll show you the trek up there and around the village, and hope you enjoy. Nepal was facing many difficulties during my visit in November 2015. Difficulties faced in the wake of the earthquakes were compounded by a blockade on the Indian-Nepal border as a protest against the new Nepal-India constitution. This meant very little could be imported into Nepal, creating a crippling fuel and cooking gas shortage. Queues for fuel filled the roads as people left their vehicles unattended for days at a time. Schools closed due to a lack of school buses to transport their students, and no cooking gas to prepare their meals. Trees were felled for firewood all over Nepal, not just in Kathmandu, even in the protected forests, in a desperate attempt to provide firewood in order to be able to cook meals and keep families warm at night. Even pharmacies and hospitals began to run out of medicines, while ambulances didn't even have fuel to run, creating, real lack of safety for local people and tourists visiting, creating a real mess. People who couldn't commute to work faced losing their jobs in the fragile economy, while building materials couldn't be imported or transported within Nepal due to a lack of fuel for trucks. Difficult lives have been made nearly unbearable. It's hard for me to imagine how people can go through the psychological trauma of the earthquakes and begin looking to the future, to work out how they can look after their families and recover, only to be thrown into all the fresh uncertainties that blockade created. Many were still living in temporary shelters, which could soon be extremely cold in the winter. Now political unease was extending all the uncertainties initially created by the earthquakes. People were not knowing if they would be able to continue to cook for their families, if their children could continue to attend school, or whether they could reach work in order to keep their jobs. Familiar stress and anxiety that was in the air following the earthquakes returned due to this political instability. But people were still determined to get through these difficult times, doing everything they could to keep some kind of normality amongst this chaos. we are in Gonga after around a 10-hour very bumpy jeep ride. Always absolutely exhausting, just completely takes it out of you, and I can't imagine what it's like to drive it, let alone just sit in a seat and go along with it. It's just constant up and down and round corners, round turns. But today obviously was really quite different to the last trip that I took up here. Almost a year today. Obviously there hadn't been an earthquake, and you know, today was just obviously completely different to last year. It's really quite hard hitting to see just, you know, what's happened here. I mean, you know, in Kathmandu there's some damage, there's the occasional house down or, you know, monastery affected or whatever, but it's honestly quite hard to describe. I mean, even when I went out to Gurkha on the aid trip with Kopan Helping Hands before I left Nepal, just after the earthquake, there was kind of dotted damage around, but no it was scattered, it wasn't everywhere. This time, the closer we got to our destination, every single village nearly completely destroyed, and it's really hard to see, and to see people completely displaced and living in temporary shelters, most of which are made of zinc sheeting, a bit of wood, and that's pretty much it. Obviously no insulation, no heating, so once the winter comes around, and it's great for the monsoon because it keeps, obviously, you know, well, I imagine it probably leaked, but kept a reasonable amount of the water off. But once the winter comes around, it's going to be so cold, with no insulation and nothing to protect them from the elements really. And you drive along and it's just literally village after village after village of crumbled homes and just heaps of debris everywhere. And then the roads are scarred and the landscape is scarred by all of the landslides that have come down, and it's just completely different to how it was last year. And it's a very powerful and very poignant reminder that, for one, the earth can do this. You know, just shaking for 90 seconds can cause this scale of damage in a country where obviously, you know, buildings aren't built so well. But even in a country where they are, if it's strong enough, it'll still bring the buildings down. But also that ultimately things change. You know, every second of every moment things are changing. We're changing, everything around us is changing. And we just don't, because it's so subtle most of the time, we just don't see it. But when it's just so catastrophic and it's so obvious, you can't deny it. And it's a real eye-opener and a real jolting you awake to the fact that everything can change in an instant. And although it's hard-hitting to see a country that you love struggling so much, they're also, as I keep saying, unbelievably resilient, unbelievably resourceful. And you drive through these villages and you see these piles of debris which were once houses, or not even houses, which were once homes. You know, this was the place that they lived. It was their pride, their joy. You know, this was everything they had, and now it's a pile of rubble. And yet they're okay. You know, they're managing, and they're, you know, you see them. I mean, some people you drive through and you see them sat on the rubble of their homes, just sat there chatting, or, you know, cleaning hair or brushing hair, or just the usual stuff, while sat on their house, the rubble of their home, next door to which is their prefab house, effectively. Just, you know, a few sheets of zinc joined together, all four walls and the roof. No windows most of the time, a door, and that's it. And yet they look okay. They look like they're managing. But, you know, I guess for the Western mind, you can't quite fathom how they could be okay. You know, I really can't imagine being in that situation where my childhood home or My family's home is just completely razed to the ground. I can't imagine going back and seeing that and then being okay with it. Good morning, everyone. So woke up this morning feeling a bit brighter after a good sleep. I think the 10-hour bus journey completely takes it out of you, and it's amazing how when you're tired, it can really affect the way that you see everything else. I mean, don't get me wrong, it was still really hard hitting, but obviously feeling a lot more of people's positivity this morning, and that's what's got them through everything, really. So this morning we're still in Gonga. We're just getting ready, kind of repacking our bags into what we want to take on our backs and what we want the porters to take up for us, and have breakfast, and then we'll be heading out. And as you can see behind me, Gonga is quite an industrial settlement, I guess, not even really big enough to be a town. And it's used for gathering of sand and wood, and it's also a big, medium-sized hydro power station here as well, which unfortunately was also damaged by the earthquake, so they're now able to harvest a lot less power from that now, which is unfortunate because the area used to get a lot of their electricity from that station. So I'm just going to flip you around so you can see a bit. So this is Gonga. So it used to be a lot bigger than this. A number of the homes and guest houses were destroyed in the earthquake, unfortunately. See massive sand stores, a lot of which comes from the riverbed, which you might be able to hear, which is roaring just down to our right. And just over there you can see a big landslide as well. We'll be walking through there later, so I'll show you a bit more of that then. So it's always been a more industrial kind of settlement. There are a few families here, most of which obviously make the most of the industry that's here, and also guest houses, because this is the trailhead to go into Rolwaling. So you get the bus up to here and then you walk on into the mountains. In terms of getting to where we're going, there are no more roads, so anybody who wants to go to Rolwaling, whether local or tourists, they have to do the 2 or 3 day walk into the village from here. Some of the ruins of some of the houses. So building work is happening at the moment to try and rebuild. Some have already been rebuilt. Some have used the zinc and wood, you can see over there. And some have rebuilt with what we'd see as the more traditional materials, brick and mortar. See, a lot of that depends on how much money they have. Expecting, depending on where we stop today, whether it's Simigon or the next tea house along, expecting the walk to be between 4 and 7 hours. So we're just going to see how we go the altitude, because it's quite steep, so you gain it quite quickly. So we'll just see how it goes. Speak to you all soon. Golika district was at the centre of the largest aftershock, which hit Nepal in May 2015. This resulted in additional damage to buildings and many landslides in mountainous areas such as this one. Many of the vital roads which had been cleared, but some, such as this one, were still covered in landslides, making them impassable to vehicles and leaving us to climb over the rocks which remained, whilst looking at the massive cracks along the edge of what was the road, with quite a lot of unease, and kind of imagining what it would be like if those cracks were to give way and fall into the riverside below. Climbing up and over them certainly added to our journey time, but more importantly it meant that the villages further up the road had become cut off once again, which is a real shame, and also including a hydro plant right at the end, which was providing electricity for some of the area, was now unable to be reached and therefore unable to be serviced and repaired and everything else. So it's creating a lot of problems. So the hope is that quite soon this road will be cleared and hopefully rebuilt, because much of the road has actually just completely disappeared down into the river, So there's now not enough space left for there to be any kind of road, even when the landslides are removed. So it will have to be built into the cliff edge once again, which will take some time, but hopefully will be done in the near future. Despite the obstacles created by the earthquake, continue along the trek, you soon leave the road, and go on to the hill tracks which you'll be following for the rest of the route to Rolwaling. So from here on in, all the way up to Rolwaling, you won't be seeing any vehicles or hearing any vehicles. It's very much you and nature. Straight away, as you can see, there's further damage to the houses going through here. You're just coming into the village of Chechet, which is a very small settlement. First one you come to on the route through to Rolwaling. So from here on in, you're going along the mountain trails and crossing the rivers and going up over the hills. So very much entering the nature from here on in. So, having crossed the river and conquered the steps up the side of the mountain, you emerge into Simigon village, a large Sherpa settlement built on the side of a hill with stunning views of the valley, Rio and far beyond. where there is time to relax, have a drink, and simply enjoy the views. Simagon is home to hundreds of people and was sadly very badly hit by the earthquakes. The damage is extensive, with home after home either completely destroyed or severely cracked, making them uninhabitable. Most of the villagers are still living there, attempting to rebuild, which is going to take a lot of patience, perseverance, and time. They're now having to try and look after their families, whilst living in very difficult circumstances, with many young children living in the village still needing to be looked after, while a lot of the men must leave in order to work as porters or mountain guides to bring money back to their families, having no choice but to leave the children with their mothers and grandparents to be looked after. So it's a pretty difficult life now. There's still a lot of rebuilding of buildings and lives to do in this area. Some of the worst hit parts of the village were the community's Gompa and Buddhist prayer hall. The Gompa is the heart of the Buddhist community, so it's very sad for them to see it being reduced to nothing but rubble. There was also a school and health post in Simagon before the earthquakes. This is how they were, but unfortunately this is how they are now. This is one of the things that actually made the timing of the earthquakes, particularly the first one, quite fortunate in a sense, as crazy as that may sound. It was a Saturday, so schools across the country were closed. If the school was open, there would have been children in this school who would likely have been buried within this rubble. Many people say the death toll would have been higher if it had have happened on a school day or in the middle of the night when everyone was at home. Sadly, the community are now left with no Gompa or health clinic and only a temporary school. Himalayan People's Project in Nepal are not working in Simagon because it is not part of Rolwaling Valley, but there are other organisations involved and a new school is currently being built, which is fantastic. We are helping further into the mountains, which you will see towards the end of this film, and will also be fully featured in part 2. However, despite Himalayan People's Project not having direct input into Simagon village, there are actually some of the children from the village who attend the Rolwaling school, which we do support. So in an indirect way, we do support some of the families in the village who chose to send their children to Rolwaling to receive a slightly different education than they would receive in Simagon, as Simagon runs a government school with a government curriculum, whereas the one in Rolwaling is government registered, but they actually run a spiritual education and Tibetan studies alongside the standard curriculum. So it's a little bit extra, and some families choose to send them there. It's also free, and they provide free lodging, free food, free clothing, and free healthcare. So for some of the poorest people in the village, they've chosen to send their children to the Rolwaling school, which we'll see in part 2 of the film. So much more positive day today. Loving being in the mountains, always feel really, really at home in the mountains. Sounds corny, but really does make the heart sing as such, and the energy here is so, just relaxes every part of you and helps you to just let go of stresses and strains and everything else, and very, very cathartic. So really enjoying being here again, and looking forward to getting going again tomorrow. Higher up, it's going to be colder, so looking forward to seeing people in Beading again and seeing what's happening. Sounds like there's been good progress with getting all the materials up there for the new hostel and dining hall that we've helped support. So explain that a little bit more when we're there and take some footage for you to see. I think that's about it for today. So nice day, hard day, difficult trek, probably about 7 hours trekking in total, maybe a little bit more, but well worth it. It was nice, really good day. So I'll speak to you all soon. Morning everyone, up bright and early. Started at around 6:30 and just about to have some breakfast. I was told there's an earthquake last night, but I didn't feel it, so I must have been pretty tired because I slept for it, but it's just a short one, which is fairly uncommon now, but hopefully it's just the one-off. Been shaking a little and now it's settled down again. So today, likely to be another long walk all the way to Beading, as long as my body doesn't react to the altitude. So yeah, looking forward to it. A bit tired, a bit achy from yesterday. It was a pretty long day, but yeah, always look forward to trekking, being out in nature and all the energy around, beautiful forests and everything. And we get to head into the big mountains today, so that's pretty special. So I'm just going to show you around a little bit where we stayed last night. See, up there did have a little bit of earthquake damage, but luckily not too bad. So this is where we're going to be heading out from this morning. In my admittedly very biased opinion, the trek becomes more and more beautiful as you go along. So you start off, as you've seen, by crossing the river and going up the side of the mountain. And you can stop in Simigon for the night, that's no problem. There are guest houses still there that can be used. And I'm sure the village will continue to recover, and at the time more and more guest houses will open. But it is possible to stay there, and obviously supports the community as well. But you can trek on and stay the night at a very small tea house further on, if you wish, which requires quite a lot of uphill walking. But it gets that out of the way in one day, depending on how you're feeling and how things are going. The trek, as we said before, can take between 2 to 4 days. So there are different options on where you can stay along the way. As we said before, there are plenty of landslides in the area, which didn't just include roads, it was also the trekking path as well. As you can see here, there were a few challenges crossing the landslides that had come down. And we were very, very fortunate that a team from Rolwaling had already been through much earlier in the year to make it passable again, which I'll mention a little bit later on in the film. So after crossing over the landslides and other obstacles which are naturally created, you come to Dongan, which is a beautiful, beautiful, very, very small settlement right on the edge of the river. And you can also stay there. There's a tea house there. And many people choose to stay there for the night and then have a longer trek to Beeding the next day. Or you can try and get to Beeding in a day from there if you stayed after Simigon. So from here on in, you get to trek through the forests, along the river, up the mountains, and you get further and further towards Rolwaling Valley. It really is a beautiful, beautiful area, which is still very little trekked compared to a lot of the other areas in Nepal. You'll see far, far less people than you would in Langtang or Annapurna or Everest region. It's far, far quieter, although you will still see local people and porters who will be carrying stuff not just for trekkers but also for local people, bringing in goods for them to use for daily life. Morning everyone. So I wasn't in touch last night because I was a bit sick when we arrived. A bit of a headache and finding it a little bit hard to breathe. But seems to be gone now. Still a little bit of a headache, but not too bad. But I think we must be at about 3,400 metres-ish now. So a little bit of a reaction is pretty normal. But had to kind of take some rest and let it settle down, which it seems to have now, so that's good. So today is day 3 of trekking and day 4 of our trip up to Rolwaling. Yesterday we got to within touching distance really, to within 2 or 3 hours walk of Beeding, but because of me starting to feel a bit unwell we decided to stay here. which I'll show you in just a second, which isn't really designed for people. It's kind of like, I suppose in the West you may loosely call it a cafe, just basically where the porters and trekkers stop off for a cup of tea, maybe some food. It's not really designed for a place for people to stay. So last night was the first for me. I actually slept in a tent indoors, which was a little surreal, but much appreciated. So I had a mat on the floor, and obviously double insulation because of the house and then the tent, so it was pretty warm. But as you can probably see from my hat, it is pretty cold here. My hand is starting to freeze around the camera as I hold it to talk to you. Yesterday was another great day. Did another, probably took us about 7 or 8 hours, including some stop-offs. Great again to see progress and what was actually involved with getting stuff together to build these things that we're helping them build. Obviously stopping at the place where they're preparing the wood for the hostel and the dining hall. Just incredible to see how much work and effort goes into these things out here. It's not just a case of cut down a tree, put it on the back of a lorry, take it to a wood mill. It's, they have to do everything on site. So they cut the tree themselves without chainsaws, and then they strip it all back, cut it into, kind of lengths that can then be sawn into strips, and it's all by hand, all without electricity, and it's quite incredible, which you would have seen from the footage. So it really gives you an appreciation for how much hard work goes into these things out here, and also why it costs more, because obviously, the work power, the manpower that goes into that is extremely substantial. Because they then have to walk it down or walk it up. They don't have a truck that comes to collect it. They're on a footpath, which is at least 2 days, probably 1 or 2 days walk down to the road. So it's it's really, really tough work. So it was all pretty much uphill again yesterday. Quite a tough walk, but really beautiful, following the river, crossing over a couple of times. The old path was destroyed by the landslides created by the earthquake, and 2 of the bridges were now out of action. So the Rolwaling team, who prepared the path, I think around 4 or 5 months ago now, did an incredible job, and they reopened it all, created a new wooden bridge, and cleared all of the landslides on the other side of the river. So we actually used what used to be the old path to get here, rather than cross over the river earlier and use the new path. I don't know if that took longer or not, I forgot to ask, but it was interesting using a different path. It was up and over landslides again, which can be a bit tricky, but the Rolwaling team did an amazing job of preparing the path to not only allow trekkers in, but also trade. Also allowing the food that they can't grow up here to be transported up, and the stuff for the building work and everything else. Without that, the communities would have been pretty much cut off. So hats off to them, they did an amazing job. Today we're going to be trekking on to Beeding. It's about 2 to 3 hour walk, much easier going, less up and down, much more flat, just a little bit of an up at the end, and we should be able to stop in at the school on the way, which we're supporting. But the kids aren't there right now. They're at a temporary school near Charicot, which you go past on the bus. It's about 5 hour bus journey from the roadhead here. They were relocated there after the earthquake, so they could continue to go to school whilst the school here is repaired, which hopefully will be happening soon. So we're going to get going soon, and I'll just give you a quick tour around here before my hand completely freezes, and then hopefully get some footage on the way. I'll speak to you soon. So as you can see, it was pretty cold here last night. Thick frost on the ground. We're up into the classes, the high mountains now, so to be expected. That's why kind of warm weather gear is so important. Otherwise, you get yourselves into all kinds of trouble. Beautiful morning light coming up over the mountains. Once the sunlight comes in, and you're stood in the sunlight, it actually gets quite warm quite quickly, but when you're in the shade, it's really quite chilly. That's where we stayed last night. Just a small dwelling, about 2 separate rooms inside, and my tent. But I'm in one of those rooms. Very, very basic, very simple. No toilet at the moment. Toilet was destroyed in the earthquake. So you have to use what the locals call open toilet, which means find a spot, squat down and do your business. So interesting when it's so cold. But that's just the way it is up here. Life is tough. You just have to go with the flow. So surrounded by pretty high mountains. We're fairly open here. Once we trek on, we move into a more closed valley. Just way in the distance there, you can see the snow-capped mountains, and we're going to walk towards that. So, it's around 7 a.m. It'll be breakfast soon, so I'll sign off now and we'll see you soon. For the last part of our trek, we quickly came across the landslide that came down just after the first big earthquake of 2015. Unfortunately, it caused extensive damage to the winter settlement of the Rolwaling villagers, the place where they'd normally go to take shelter at that time of the year when the valley gets particularly cold and harsh weather conditions come down with a lot of snow. Unfortunately, a whole number of houses there have now been completely destroyed, totally bulldozed by the landslide. And we'll show you more footage, close up of that in part 2, which we will be bringing to you soon. After a reasonably short walk of only about 1.5 to 2 hours, we soon came to within throwing distance of Beeding, which you can just see in the far distance there on the left-hand side of the river. So you get to drop down right by the side of the river, so when you're staying in Beeding and in Nar further up, you have the wonderful noise of the roaring river as a constant soundtrack going on in the background. So for others trekking along here, this point of the trek is likely to be the end of a longer day because obviously we stopped off at an unusual point because I wasn't feeling so well. So normally you'd be getting here from staying much further back along the trail. So we hope you've enjoyed coming along on a bit of a virtual tour of the trek into Rolwaling. And also just seeing kind of what the area has been through over the past year since the earthquakes, just to get an idea of what the remote communities are battling out there in Nepal at the moment, and also the work that we're trying to do as a charity to help the people of Rolwaling recover. So part 2, which will be coming soon, is much more about my time spent up in Rolwaling, in the village here in Beeding and further up in Na, and just explaining a little bit more about what we're doing with the community up here and what it's like to be in Beeding and spending time up there. So we hope you'll join us for that soon.